Please, Ayyā Somā, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
Right. Well, thank you, Bante, and thank you all for practicing together tonight. So the subject is obsessive thoughts for tonight, which probably in during this pandemic time, we've all been obsessing about several different things, whether it's news related or family related or job related or just even sitting down in meditation and looking for peace in meditation perhaps, and then noticing having to deal with an incredibly restless mind, that the more sometimes I can feel that the more we're looking for peace, the more we're actually finding more and more chaos and more obsessive thoughts. We're trying to master non-thinking. And then as soon as we sit down, we're overloaded by thinking. So I always feel that meditation practice is such a gift because it really gives us the opportunity to kind of look at our minds and really understand what the situation is like and understand what we're doing and what we don't have any control over. And how we are still so deluded that even though we kind of realize that we have no control over something, we keep on wanting it to be different, or we keep on altering it, or we keep on putting all the effort that we can in what we can't control instead of what we can control. So, for example, one of the most common things that happens whenever we do mindfulness of breathing is we start controlling the breath, like. But when you think about it, actually, like most of the day, when we're not paying attention to it, we're letting it go do its course, and we have no problem with it. But we are so obsessed, since we're paying attention to it. There's something that happens in the mind where we want to shift, we want to alter things. And then when we start loosening up a little bit on that domain, then we get inundated with thoughts and a lot of different things that we have produced, ideas and planning and whatever it is. So there's this whole kind of overflowing of information. And our instinctive reaction is of aversion, perhaps. Because we're like, oh, this is really not working. Why can't I control my mind? Why am I doing this? I don't like this. I don't want this. This has to stop. So it becomes an unpeaceful, unmindfulness of breathing. Then we forget that we're supposed to pay attention to the breath to begin with. And then we're like, oh, wait, I have to pay attention to the breath. Oh, but wait, why is it not working? Wait, why is it this? Why is it there? So I used to live in Rockaway Beach, where we were, prior to Empty Cloud Monastery that is in West Orange. We were at the Rockaway Summer House in Rockaway Beach in New York City, by the water. And unfortunately, a lot of times people drowned when they were in the water. And it was really interesting to learn how the process of drowning would happen. And normally it was when the waves would get really intense, then the person would start panicking and they would try to go against the waves in order to reach the shore. So the shore was here. They were here in the middle of the water. The waves were coming. So the instinctive reaction was to go and find the shore. And what would happen would be that the person would be overwhelmed by the strength of the ocean and drown. And what you're supposed to be doing in those types of situations, when the reef how do you call it, the corrente, the
Riptide.
riptide. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you, Bante. Bante is also like my English dictionary / encyclopedia, aside from my Buddhist teacher. So when you get caught in the riptide, what you're supposed to do is actually not fight it back, fight against it, and just kind of let it like follow the sort of flow. And then if the riptide is coming here and you're here, you follow it, and then you go sideways and you reach the shore. And the reason why I'm bringing up this metaphor, it's because it's actually very similar to what we do sometimes in meditation. So we are bombarded, quote unquote, by these thoughts that we think we're producing, we think we can control. So we get perhaps angry that they're not stopping, and we fight back. So we're like, I don't want this. I'm going to stop. Stop thinking. Stop thinking. Stop thinking. So we're trying to reach the shore by going against this water of thoughts. And it defeats the purpose, because then that's when the meditation practice doesn't really go that well. But when we actually kind of surrender to this sort of stream that is coming with us, and we kind of like let it guide, and then we take it sideways, then we start going towards the shore. So once again, we see what the problem is. The problem is wanting. The problem is approaching meditation practice with an idea of what meditation practice is supposed to be, rather than what it is. So if we just see it, if we just kind of build up the strength to kind of just look at it, understand it for what it is, and have faith in the Buddhist teachings, because that's what the Buddha is explaining to us all the time. How it's impermanent, everything is suffering, has the qualities of suffering, impermanence, and non-self. So all these thoughts are impermanent, and they're not self. And the more, what is the cause of suffering? Wanting to be it in one way or the other way. So obviously then this experience becomes suffering when we want it to be different. So when we start approaching meditation practice with that sort of kind of spectator approach, rather than I am in charge of everything. I can decide at what rhythm my breath is going, and I can decide whether to remove or add this thought. I mean, you kind of let go of the grip. Then we can start having a meditation that is more understanding how things are. So where we're cultivating wisdom instead of cultivating further attachment, further craving. And that's when we can release to it, and actually becomes a very pleasant, blissful experience, letting go instead of holding on to whatever appears in the mind. So then once the riptide is over, then it becomes a nice, flat, beautiful sea. And as we train ourselves in this way in meditation, then that inevitably transfers into everything else that we're experiencing in everyday life. So then we can actually meditate every single moment of our day, without it being actually just sitting in formal meditation, thinking that that's the only way through which we can actually cultivate um, this wisdom. So we can watch the news and understand the impermanence of the news. Understand that we have no control over the news. Understand that if we want things to be different than how they are, then we're not looking really at how things are in the moment that they are. And so our experience is permeated with suffering instead of creating room for developing wholesome mind states, for developing positive, wholesome actions that dispel suffering, that remove suffering. So what we do is instead layer suffering on top of suffering on top of suffering. So it's very important to really build up that strength in meditation practice, to then be capable of practicing that way in everyday life. So one of the most common things that happens during retreats is that people become overwhelmed by their minds, overwhelmed by all of their emotions. And then at a certain point, if the retreat is long enough, they start disappearing. And I have to say, this has happened to me as well. I didn't disappear. I actually stayed in some occasions, also because I had no choice. I was in the middle of nowhere and I don't drive. So, so there's that. So I had to go and face, my experience. And I'll share actually one of these biggest precious moments where I really had to come to terms with the three characteristics of my experience, and also understanding that I have no control over it. So it was at this, actually there are a few times I've had similar experiences, but the biggest one, the first one, was when I went to Bhavana Society during this retreat. And I was PMSing. So women do in fact PMS. And sometimes this just comes that my experience is I just get very sleepy. And some other times there's like a sort of whole of, so many different emotions that are part of the physical body, produces a lot of different endorphins. I don't know what they're called exactly in science. So it produces corresponding emotions if you're not exactly aware of what's going on. So at that time, I had no idea that I was actually PMSing. So I was doing my meditation practice, and so many crazy things appeared in my mind. So strong emotions. The classic one that apparently happens to everyone. The person next to me had a breathing problem. So there was so much anger and ill will for that person, as if like they had kind of plotted to ruin my entire life, got in this breathing disorder just to destroy my entire retreat. So I had all of this rage arising and thoughts of ill will appearing in my mind. And then the second after, I was like, oh yeah, I'm so happy, ha 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 ha. And then after a little while, I was just like, oh, life is all full of suffering. I'm so depressed. And then after 5 minutes, I was back into hating and plotting how to kill the person next to me. And I was like, oh my God, I'm mentally deranged. I should not be at a meditation retreat. I need to go to a psychiatrist and lock myself up, because this is completely, utterly insane. And so I started obsessing about all of these thoughts and trying to crash them, but they were overwhelming. The more I was trying to stop myself from plotting to kill the old lady next to me, the more this thought was appearing. And the more I was full of shame and regret. And I thought, oh, I thought I was that little like lovely person that was offering free retreats, oh, with a price tag in New York City. I'm like such a devout Buddhist. Wait, why am I plotting? Why do I have all these homicidal instincts? That shouldn't be part of my persona. I do not want that. That's shameful. Nobody should know. Right now I'm broadcasting it. So now you all know. Ayyā Somā, that psycho monk. So it was a lot of distress, I went back to my kuti and I started crying. It was a lot of turmoil. I went to Bante Gunaratana was one of the monks leading that retreat, and I went on a private conversation with him, a discussion, and actually it was very short discussion because after 2 seconds I started crying, pouring, and then feeling ashamed that I was crying and pouring in front of Banteji and going, oh my God, I'm like, this is horrible. I really need to go out of this monastery and really look for some type of help. But once again, I was there with some friends who had a car and they were having, at least so I thought, I would look at them and they were all like sitting. I'm like, yes, first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. Oh, look at Andy, look at Margaret. Oh, everybody's having like this blissful experience, but I'm here, this whole mess. Oh, and I couldn't even ask for help to Banteji because I couldn't talk. And, you know, like apparently Banteji had one of these next to him. So like, he just passed me tissues so I could get it together. And then at a certain point, you know, since I was stuck there and I had to deal with my own mind, and I didn't have my phone, I couldn't call anyone, you know, like how they do in TV shows, like, oh, helpline, gonna call someone. So I was like, so if Bhante Sudasa were here, what would he actually advise me to do in this situation? So I cultivated my inner Bhante, which, by the way, I highly recommend. We should all have an inner Bhante. So I was like, inner Bhante. What should I be doing right now that I am crazy and deranged? And the answer was, this is not me. This is not mine. This is not who I am. Okay, yeah, that's probably what he would tell me. So I went back to my meditation, and all of these thoughts of ill will and craving for pizza arrives, or ice cream, or whatever it is. And then it goes back to like restlessness, and then whatever, all the hindrances coming back. And I started going, well, I clearly have no control over this. So I'll just watch it. It's like, okay, this is not me. This is not mine. This is not who I am. Oh, this is what anger feels like. Oh, this is what wanting to kill feels like. Oh, this is what hilarity feels like. Oh, this is what tiredness feels like. This is what craving for pizza and ice cream feels like. And I started watching all of this like it was the best TV show that I had ever watched, because literally I had no control over it. The only control that I had over it was stopping to obsess about it. So instead of fueling my experience with either wanting, like really thinking, pursuing whatever kind of thought. So whether it was, I want ice cream, like imagining all the ice creams, or whether it was, oh, I don't want to have those thoughts about killing the person next door. It was just like, I just let it go. I let go all of this. I let go of the wanting, and I just go, this is the state of the mind. This is what it feels like. And once I started practicing that way, the mind started settling by its own course. So, as I always like to quote Venerable Dreaming, that was a precious teaching of you cannot control the consequences, but you can control the causes. So normally we think that the consequences are who we are. Hence, we have some domain with them. But the truth is that we only had the domain a long, long time ago. And we lost that chance. So we just created the whole causes. And then there are the consequences that we're experiencing right now. So what we can always have is the domain on creating, setting the right conditions. So that's how, an obsessive thought is no different than the defilement that the Buddha talks about, which is restlessness. It's a form of restlessness. And the Buddha uses the metaphor, if I remember correctly, of being like a slave. So we're enslaved. So we can't do anything about it. And the antidote for that is developing contentment. So by accepting, looking at how things are, we're content. Instead of wanting for things to be different, and once again, perpetuating, I want, I crave, I, me, want, we're like, oh, this is what's happening. This is causes and conditions coming into being. So we start approaching everything by cultivating wisdom, by truly seeing, by practicing in accordance to what the Buddha has taught us, practicing in accordance to Dharma. So that's when we create the space and room to cultivate then all the insight practices. When we let go. So there's always the beautiful metaphor that actually Ajahn Brahm uses that I found very helpful, that you can find, I think, if you put Ajahn Brahm mindfulness, I think it's the first video, or if not the first, the second, that he's like, oh, we keep on like holding on to this, going like, yeah, let it be stable, let it be stable, let it be stable, let it be stable. And then you put it down. Now the water is stable, finally. So all you have to do is always let go, let down. But it's so difficult because we're so attached to it, constantly craving. And sometimes physical things, we can get it, but mental things, we have such an ownership towards it that it's very, very difficult to kind of step out of it and allow ourselves to just see things as they are. This is it. As Ajahn Chah, Ajahn Sumedho, and all, pretty much every Buddhist monastic says. All right, so I think I've said what I had to say about my crazy past.
Thank you, Ayya. So at this time, anyone who has questions, please feel free to write them in the live chat, and I'll read them out for Ayya. People really liked your PMS retreat story, by the way. Lots of LOL emojis, and Adriana said, wow, haha, that's too familiar. Hormones are great opportunities for practice.
Yeah, they are actually. Hormones are a great opportunity for practice. And by the way, disclaimer, so there's also something called IMS, which is not the retreat center in Massachusetts, but it's irritable male syndrome, which is exactly the same, just male version. We all are crazy.
Stacy says she can relate. Laura said she loves your stream of consciousness. Yeah, so people really like the story. There were lots of positives about that. So back to the top, Gabriella asked, I suffer from obsessive thoughts fueled by fear, shame, and guilt, with delusions of autonomy, control, and competence. How can I better accept and cope when things are completely out of my control?
Wow, that's great analysis. First of all, congratulate yourself for really being aware of the situation. What Bhante Sujato says that I really love is that Buddhism starts when psychology ends. So you kind of have to. So I congratulate you for kind of really seems that you have a clear understanding of what you're dealing with. So first of all, not being afraid of asking for help also in Western psychology. So there's a lot of tools that have been developed in Western culture to deal with particular neuroses, which are not a replacement for Buddhist practice, and Buddhist practice is not a replacement for that. But simply, it's just a help, an aid. That then once you deal with that, then your Buddhist practice is eased. So I don't know if that is something that you're already pursuing or you're interested in pursuing, or you already have the sort of ability to deal with it yourself. But it's always very important not to be afraid to ask for help. And when it comes to meditation practice, what I would recommend is taking these as opportunities to really understand. So no different than when I was talking about. So basically, pretty much any meditation, at least it's my experience with PMS, is pervaded by a lot of strong emotions that are constantly erratically changing. And then there is all the shame and all the guilt and fear. There was at the very beginning. Right now, I'm shameless and guiltless. But that's because I've been practicing a lot, and I've also understood it's just what it is. So it's becoming less and less. There's less and less a momentum. So the problem is that whenever these things appear, we identify with them and we attach to them. And most importantly, we want for them to be different, which is what I was trying to explain earlier. So instead of trying that approach, we do it in meditation first. So whenever you're experiencing all of that, really have the courage to look at your mind and really start identifying, just like you did it right now on a theoretical level, do it on an experiential level. So go, what does, I don't remember exactly the things that you were experiencing, but each one of them, can you repeat them?
Obsessive thoughts fueled by fear, shame, and guilt with delusions of autonomy, control, and competence.
Okay, so fear, what does fear feel like? Fear is a qualitative, tangible, tactile experience to it. So you don't have to start obsessing about, no labeling. No, like, oh, fear. Okay, this is fear because of this and that. And this person told me that. And when I was 3 years old, this happened. And now that I'm a little older, I remember also when I was 17 and I'm connecting the dots, blah, 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 blah. No, none of that. Like really going, okay, there is fear right now. What does it feel like? No different than I pick up this cup and I close my eyes and I'm like, what does it feel like? I have zero memories of this cup. We found it here at the monastery. The only thing I'm concerned with, there's no thoughts arising. There's just, what does it feel like? It's a little cold. It's tough. I'm terrible with describing things in English. But anyway, the tactile experience of it. Same goes with shame, same goes with guilt. Not being shameful of having shame, not having guilt that you have guilt. So not fueling it, but just being with the experience. So start understanding it without wanting to get rid of it. without approaching it with that, oh, it shouldn't be there. Oh, I've been practicing for so long. Why is it still there? No, I should be a better practitioner. Wait, I should be just all blissful and calm. So that's just wanting, craving, 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 craving. The more we want the jhanas, the more we're going in the right direction. Because jhanas are not attainments, they are letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go.
By the way, when you mentioned IMS, Jim said, "Oh, I got that bad." And Gabriella said, "I call it PMS, Pissy Man Syndrome."
Okay, that's great, Gabriella.
Let's see. Victor asked, when I grew up in Buddhist school, meditation was a form of punishment. I think because of that, meditation is never relaxing for me. Actually, that's not a question, it's just a comment.
Okay, well then it's a great opportunity for you to relate to it in a different way. So probably you have aversion towards meditation. Actually, not without probably. I think you have a bit of an aversion towards meditation because every time you bring it up, like, oh, can we, like, just get enlightened without developing anything that you have to develop in meditation? So there's clearly aversion. So what a gift. You have a strong emotion to that whenever you sit down, you just go no different than when I was telling to Gabriella. Sorry, the answer is always the same. It's just feel what aversion feels like. Make that the object of your meditation practice. And then you start seeing that this aversion is constantly changing. And then you're going to start noticing a pleasant experience arising in the mind the more you let go of all your thoughts and ideas on what meditation is like. And then that will start permeating your mind, and then you're going to want to meditate because you're going to see that it is conducive to liberation, that is making you happier, a better person. So Victor, you have to come on retreat here because it's much easier to do it when you have lots of people around you meditating with yourself, with you, when you're following a schedule. So as soon as the pandemic is over, we are going to automatically register you for an overnight retreat.
There are a bunch of people who thanked you for sharing your stories. They also liked the whole inner Bhante thing. Tina C says, I can't get over thinking about my procrastinating colleague. I'm thinking of switching my project so that I don't have to deal with him.
So ill will is what the Buddha uses the metaphor of a sickness, so an illness, something that is really devouring us on the inside. And you can see it. You're having this experience now. So it's been a while that you've been sharing that you have all these difficulties. So it's a great opportunity to see it, to see how it actually, your colleague might be giving you a hard time, but you are much more unkind to yourself than your colleague, because you're the one, it's kind of like if your colleague is slapping you in the face and then you take a flog and you start multiple times a day flogging yourself, right? So you're kind of like, well, wait, who should I pay attention to the one who slapped me in the face or the one who is like flogging me multiple times? Maybe the one who's flogging myself multiple times. Oh, that's me. And actually it's the only one I can't control. That's a great news. So really looking at it on an experiential level. I once went on this 2-week retreat, and I spent the first 4 days obsessing about how much I hated this person. It was so bizarre. Like I had a sort of kind of unpleasant interaction with them a couple of days before going on retreat. And for 4 days, I had not these thoughts of ill will, but of aversion. can't believe that, blah, blah, blah. And he was a Buddhist practitioner, so I had all this like righteous indignation going in my mind, like he's been practicing for so long. It's not Bante, by the way. Someone else. So I was like, they should know better. Like, I can't believe that they said that thing. That sounds racist. And like, on my scale of values, it's absolutely inappropriate. And they should know. And oh my God. Came to the fourth day of the retreat that I was like, I just got like so bored of myself being irritated. Just like, seriously, you need to get it together. Like, you're obsessing about this guy who hasn't even like done anything except for saying something minor, an annoying comment. I'm like, well, there are people that are torturing little children. Like, if you have to get so upset, at least take a sort of like more valuable kind of cause than someone who just shared a delusional thought once, but actually does also a lot of nice things, a lot of good things. So perhaps maybe start noticing also the good things that your colleague does. Start paying attention to the other causes and conditions that he contributes to creating that you're benefiting from. And there has to be something, because no one is purely 100% evil. Even Hitler cared about animals. So like, even like the most horrible, human being, you can find something. So I'm pretty sure that your colleague is not Hitler. So probably has more than just likes to take care of animals kind of on the list.
Okay, and Sarah Victor says, hi, Ayya, thank you for your talk and honesty. Do you have a practical tip for handling obsessive thoughts in the moment? Any physical or mental aid that could help relieve the obsession?
Yes, mindfulness of breathing, but also, unfortunately, with everything. So we call Buddhist insights, we call Buddhist practice a practice because it's a practice. It's not a quick fix. So we like the idea of quick fixes, but unfortunately, you have to practice in order to reap anything. It's kind of like going out, like you read a book on gardening, then you go out, and without having planted anything in your backyard, you're like, where are the flowers? Wait, where's the flower? Wait, flower, grow. Hey, I need to harvest the flowers. Where are the flowers? Well, you have to seed them first. You have to do all the hard work. So don't worry too much about right now in terms of overcoming the thoughts, but take them as opportunities to actually understand your mind. So when they appear, just sit down, do your practice, and really get to the nutshell of what your experience is like. And remember, each time that you pay attention to the breath, you bring your attention to the breath and you keep your attention to the breath, you're training your mind. And you think there is that delusion that whenever there are thoughts interacting, a lot of different things, that you're not practicing well, but actually you're practicing well. It's just that we're disoriented because we have an idea of what meditation practice should be like. But we need to actually be capable of staying with, let's call it the object, while everything else is going on. So becoming equanimous to everything else over and over again. So the more you practice this way, you'll see immediate beneficial result, calming results, which then will also calm and soothe your obsessive thinking. But the tendency of obsessing about things will still be there because you need to practice in order for that not to arise. And Jen has a question.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, do you have any experience on dealing with pleasant thoughts, obsessive thinking on pleasant thoughts? Like, I just don't want to get rid of it, both like in meditation and in real life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the same exact thing. So it's not that only unpleasant thoughts bring suffering, also pleasant thoughts bring suffering. So you want to the Buddha knows when to think, and knows when not to think, and knows what to cultivate, and knows what not to cultivate. So there are certain pleasant thoughts that you can bring up, which is that cultivate metta, for example, but you have to do it intentionally. So you're sitting down and you're like, okay, now I'm going to practice and develop wholesome thoughts of metta, mudita, karuna, upekkha.
Like not that good thoughts. For example,
Exactly. So those are the good thoughts that are permitted. The good thoughts of like, ooh, I want to go on a ski trip with my family. So cute. Yay. We're going to rent skis. And maybe my mom is going to rent a snowboard. Oh, yay. And then we're going to have food. Yay. No, that's just craving. That's in the realm of sensual desire. So that's what the Buddha actually defines as a debt. You're taking a loan. So I think it's actually quite apt because you'll see a lot of people, for example, in this country have lots of debt of credit cards. And a lot of them, I have a few friends actually that way, like when they would take up credit cards just for the sake of it. It was very pleasant, situation. Yeah, swipe, yay! I want this like Prada bag. Swipe. Oh, I want this like jacket. Swipe. Oh, very pleasant. But then you have to repay this debt, and that's a little unpleasant. So that's why it's not, something. It doesn't matter whether the craving for pleasant thought or an unpleasant thought. It's the craving itself that is the cause of suffering.
Okay. And then Sheridan Smith says, my struggle is mostly comparing my practice with others. Of course, my image of their practice. How would you deal with this extensively, giving up comparing mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. We all do it to some degree or the other. So I was actually talking about during that famous retreat that I was with my friends Margaret and Andy, and I was having all these ideas that they were, having had attained all the jhanas while I was in this like whole horrible, tormented practice, and how it was so shameful that I had cried in front of Bhante Ji. Then the retreat is over, and my friend was like, oh yes, I cried also with Bhante Ji. And then actually we met some others, and they had also cried in front of Bhante Ji. So actually Bhante Ji is like the most amazing, compassionate person. And I realized that the box of tissues that he had next to him was not for him, but was for, okay, next, next crazy person, next. So it's kind of like, it's actually impressive how, this incredible being, he's so wise. But I feel like most of his private interviews are him being equanimous towards people crying for most of the interview. And then, I was talking to my other friend, and the other friend was also like, my mind was a mess. I couldn't stop thinking. Like it was just, I was overwhelmed by all of these different ideas. So the thing is, you start realizing the more you surround yourself with spiritual practitioners and you actually create a nice, loving, caring, and open relationship, then you start realizing that you have all these projections of how other people are practicing. But fundamentally, especially in meditation practice, the most ridiculous thing one can do is comparing oneself to another. Because you have no idea what people are doing in their practice. And when you think you do, you're probably wrong. And the more you talk with others, then you also realize that you're not that special. That pretty much everybody is going through the same shade of greed, hatred, and delusion. It's just that manifests differently. And we think that we're so special because we identify with all our thoughts. We identify with all our emotions. So it's very difficult to step out of that. Then you're like, oh, okay, my friends here are going through the same. And I've been running now Buddhist Insights with together with Bante for quite some time now, to have an idea, to have seen several different people and getting really an understanding of the workings of the mind that are so common and so similar for each one of us. So that that also, it's letting go. You're like, oh, okay, that's fine. I don't need to compare myself with Bante. I don't need to compare myself with May. I don't need to compare myself with Jen. I don't need to compare myself with Ayyā Somā. I don't need to compare myself with anyone. What I need to do is really understand how things are. Really just commit to the practice, do the work, and always going back to the Four Noble Truths. This is suffering. This is the cause of suffering. There is an end of suffering, and this is the way out of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. Always getting back to that. Otherwise, we just keep on reinforcing our sense of identity, and boosting our suffering to the roof.
And Yasavi Vijayawanta asks, how can one become successful without having expectations? How does one use the letting go concept while still trying to reach a certain goal? Or do you simply accept the path even if it doesn't lead to one's goal?
Yeah, one of the most beautiful things of the Buddhist path is how counterintuitive it is. If it were so intuitive, well, we wouldn't need the Dhamma. We would just go, But then you see, that's why I use that metaphor of being in the ocean, and how you drown actually when you think that the shortest way to the shore is just going straight and going against the waves and the riptide, and then you get caught in the riptide and you drown. So the majority of people, that will be their instinct. Their natural instinct will be to do that, which is why people drown. So it's only by having a sort of map. We put all these maps in Rockaway Beach, for example, of how to get out of the riptide, clear instructions, then you're able to get out of it without drowning. So understanding that we are not to trust 100% our immediate kind of direction, and developing a strong faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. That is what I would say propels you the most in spiritual practice, because it gives you like the sort of kick to really practice, not for the sake of attainment, but for the sake of liberation. I also find it very helpful, the Mahayana Bodhisattva vow, actually. So when you start pointing your mind to, I do this for the benefit of all beings, then you start practicing with a different attitude. Instead of like, I want this so much, I want this so much. You're like, well, actually, for example, I want to meditate in order to become enlightened. What if you start approaching it with, actually, when I meditate, I become a much better, pleasant person for all the people that are around me. Bhante Soldazo finds me more tolerable. May finds me more tolerable. Jen finds me more tolerable. So then if I'm lazy, then I'm like, well, actually, I'm practicing for the benefit of other beings. And I see it automatically, actually. You get really nice. That's very instant gratification, because you see that people are reacting like a lot better towards you when you actually have a practice than when you don't practice, when you practice for yourself, and then you become a little lazier, and then you're like a little bit more intolerant. So that's, I would say, cultivate really wholesome motivations for why we're doing the practice that we're doing. And that cultivates a mind of letting go. And then just really being practicing contentment with how things are. Obviously putting effort, but effort doesn't mean struggle. So you can cross, for example, the room by putting effort. Obviously, I need to stand up and make the effort of crossing the room. But this would be without suffering. But if I actually stand up and I'm like, no, I really need to get to the other part of the room. I will be so drained out of this exertion that I'll probably lose interest before crossing the room. And then I will develop aversion. Now I have already aversion towards standing up and crossing the room, and I just faked it, So, so really not changing a little bit the approach to spiritual practice.
Okay. So we have another 4 questions left. Gabriella asks, when I meditate and bring the mind to stillness, samadhi, I usually have less difficulty with obsessive thoughts as the thoughts fade into the periphery. But I have had recent difficulties that seem to have come out of nowhere. Is it normal for samadhi to come and go based on external or just internal conditions?
I don't understand. Can you repeat?
She's saying that recently she's been having problems with samadhi.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something which can be based on external conditions or only internal conditions?
I would personally need to understand, have a little bit more details. So maybe you can send us an email and we can discuss it further there.
Okay. And Sally asks, why does aversion towards an object create a strong connection with this object and repeat over? Aversion actually is that we don't want it. We want to get rid of it. I'm curious why the result is the opposite.
Okay, repeat. Because English is not my first language, so I have to...
Okay, why can aversion towards an object create a strong connection with this object?
Oh, because aversion is no different than craving. It's just the flip side. You still want for something to be in a particular way. You just don't want it to be in one way. So if I now start obsessing that I want this cup to be brown instead of red, I still want the cup to be in some shape or form. I still want to experience something. It's just that I do it in an even more unpleasant way than the craving. Just average sensual pleasure. And I know aversion very well because I'm an aversive type. So I normally I'm more focused on what is wrong than what is pleasant and craveable.
Okay. And Victor said he'll join us for a retreat.
Sadhu, 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 Victor.
Melvin asked, why is the 7-day retreat on impermanence only 7 days? Why does it have to end?
Because it's impermanent. But you can actually be on retreat from now until enlightenment. How's that?
Okay. And last question, Sally asks, Ayya, thank you for sharing your story as a model. I think I have strong attachment and obsessive thinking with self-image. I care so much how other people think about me. How to overcome this?
Well, that's very common, I would say. If you're a female, it's also something that I think in 99% of human societies, it's kind of like brought up on people of the female gender. So first of all, being gentle with yourself and going, okay, well, there's this situation that I am dealing with. And there are these breaking down also. I find it very helpful actually to, right now I'm reading this book Buddhism After Patriarchy from Rita Grass, the late Rita Grass. And I find it very helpful because it actually breaks down both the history and the present of Buddhism specifically, and of patriarchy, obviously in direct correlation with Buddhism. So I get a better understanding of my current experience and also my past experience as a female, both before getting, interacting in the Buddhist world, and now as, before as a female layperson, and now as a female ordained monastic. So then it's also easier for me to kind of detach from certain emotions, thoughts, and experiences that I'm having, understanding what are the causes and conditions that bring these thoughts or actions to happen. So I would say that if you approach getting woke with that perspective, so through the lenses of awakening, then they can be a very good tool for awakening, for dispelling delusion. So being obsessed with your own image is just another expression of delusion, but it has different causes and conditions. Some that you are, putting together, and some that you're obviously putting together, but because of the environment and the culture that you grew up with and all the different shades, etc. So I feel it's important and to understand the fabric of the society in which one lives in and certain dynamics, because those can really be helpful then to kind of understand where you have to work on. And also to just make them less personal. You're like, okay, well then people, it's not that they all hate me as Ayyā Somā. They're like, oh, people are relating to me like this because I have this sort of rupa, it's all about my rupa, not about anything else.
Okay. And that's the last question, and it's almost 9 o'clock, so I think we should go ahead and stop there. Oh, one last question. Boone asks, can we say when our attitude is to get a result that it is driven by desire? But if our attitude is to focus on the cause of the effect, then it is driven by wisdom?
Say it again.
Can we say that when our attitude is to get a result, then it is driven by desire? But if our attitude is to focus on the cause, then it is driven by wisdom?
It's focused on the cause. I'm not quite sure. This is too philosophical of a question for me right now. But I would say don't overthink it. Just really come to practice with pure mind and a genuine wish for yourself and others to be happy. Just keep it simple. And they were like, okay, I just want for everyone to be happy, including myself. Now I'm going to sit and practice meditation. And then afterwards, you're like, oh, I want for everyone to be happy and peaceful. Now I'm going to make lunch for everyone. And then the morning after, I want for everyone, including myself, to be happy and peaceful. Now I'm going to practice right speech with everyone. Like really coming to practice with that attitude. And then when you are not successful or you're forgetful, not to beat yourself up and just go, okay, oh, harsh speech again. Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh, little cutie, forgetful. Okay. So just being forgiving, but also resolute and going, okay, I'll try and do better.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and close there for the evening. If you wish to join us for the 7-day meditation retreat, you can follow the schedule in your own home and check in with us Starting tomorrow at 8 a.m., I'll be giving the opening instructions, and we'll unfold the retreat from there. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.